Welcome to the podcast that's dedicating to helping business owners prepare for exit so you can maximize value and exit on your terms. This is the Exit Insights podcast presented by Succession Plus. I'm Daryl Bates-Brownsword, and today I'm talking to James Church from Robot Mascot. Hey, thanks for joining me, James. And look, why don't you give us a little bit about Robot Mascot? It's an interesting name, but I'm sure it's got a powerful reason for being.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thanks for having me here. Really thrilled to be here. Look, Robot Mascot is an investment readiness agency. We basically help early stage businesses to raise their sort of first or second round of funding usually. So Robot Mascot, you mentioned the name. It's something that we get asked about quite a bit, as you can imagine. So brief explanation on that one. The robot part is very much because we, as a business, when we were founded, really wanted to work with future thinkers, innovators, people doing new things in existing or new sectors. So we wanted to work with those types of people, and robot was the sort of a symbol of the future, really. But when you think about robots, and there's a lot of discussion with AI at the moment as well, like robots are taking over the world, and in sci-fi, they're the enemy often, not the supporter. And we're, as a business, very much the supporter, the friend and allies to founders sort of navigating this world of fundraising.
So, James, so investing in early stage businesses, how do we know if a business is going to require investment or if it's going to be one of those businesses that's more suitable to bootlegging and just funding its own growth?
Yeah, I think primarily the distinction is if you need substantial capital in some kind of valuable asset in the business that's going to be worth money at the time it exits, essentially. So this asset would usually be some kind of IP or technology. Initially, it's probably less likely for you to get funding for to scale the business through sort of sales and marketing activity. I think the main thing is that these businesses that are raising investment aren't generating revenues or are a long way off generating revenues, and they have to build the IP and the sales and marketing function and they make profit at scale, but they don't make profit with a handful of customers, and therefore they're not able to attract or secure debt finance because they've got no way of paying back a business, and you're looking to scale and you already generate some revenues and you're able to pay back a loan. It might be that loans are a better way to finance and scale your business. But if you're in a position where there's an initial big upfront expenditure required to achieve profitability in 12, 18 months, maybe 36 months, then perhaps equity investment would be a better route for you.
Okay. So I guess historically that was in the goods economy, shall we say, going back quite a few years now, that would have been to get things up and running. Whereas nowadays, listening to the way you're describing it, it's more to those, hey, look, I've got an idea, I've got an algorithm, a bit of high-tech proposition here. I need to prove the concept. I'm pretty sure this idea will work. I've done some research. I've identified a market. The research suggests the market would want to acquire this, or it's a derivation of an existing solution, a subcategory, but it's often tech startups now, and we don't need a whole lot of premises and machines other than computing power.
That's it. But the whole idea of leveraging technology to make your customers' lives easier, more efficient, tends to be that you end up charging a subscription model for access to that technology, which is quite a low fee. So there's no big upfront fees to quickly, you sign up a client, they might be worth thousands, but they might only be worth 10, 20, 50 pounds a month on your platform. But it's the long-term value of that, the lifetime value of that client that's important. So obviously that your first few thousand that you're selling them to. So it's that these types of businesses that we've seen emerge over the last kind of couple of decades all require kind of a different way of financing that, not because they need big machinery, big equipment. They need a couple of developers, but even those couple of developers, you can't pay their wages to build this technology on £10 a month contracts. It's not until you hit a certain scale that you become profitable.
So what are investors looking for? Because I guess historically, and the accounting systems reflect this with balance sheet valuations as well. And it's what we're leading towards is building of intangible assets. And so what do investors look for, I guess, a level of insurance to assess their risks in this type of investment?
So like an early, it changes as you go through the stages, but at a very earliest stage, it's primarily the team. I'm investing in a team here that can adapt, change, respond to the market, and end up building something. Do I believe that team can adapt with what they learn to build something that ultimately is going to be something that the market wants, that the market needs, that is going to be, we're going to find a way to generate revenues in a way that will make us profitable, knowing full well that the original idea that is pitched to them may well be very different by the time they scale and exit the business. So they're investing in that, more kind of taking a risk on the team and the individuals in that team to be able to make something happen off of the back of this concept and this vision that they have. And as you go through different rounds of investment and get later along your journey, it tends to be less about the team and more about the performance. And have you found product market fit? Have you got a product into the market right now? And is it something people have you got evidence that it's something people want and people are using it, and that you're achieving, making progress in terms of having customers want to pay for the solution you've developed? So it kind of moves over time as to what they're looking for. But primarily it's about creating something of value, this IP, this technology, or this system or process, this brand that's going to be valuable come the end of the day. And it tends to be 4 or 5 kind of intangible assets come together to create this kind of valuable company. But it's all about the future of what its future value, if it were to find product market fit, if it was to achieve the types of scale we believe it could achieve. That's what they're valuing it on at the earliest stages. It's not the assets on the balance sheet.
Okay, so I guess these first stage investors who are investing in the concept, the big idea, I guess there's a spread of investors all taking a smaller risk because it is a higher risk, whereas investors down the track, once the product's proven, that they're now just investing in the rollout and build up of the product.
That's it. You tend to find that a typical angel round, so like angel investors, high net worth individuals coming in at an earlier stage, will have anything from 5 to 8 on average, like investors making up that round, I would say, on average. Whereas when you get to the later stage investment, maybe a Series A, and you're looking to scale up something that's already generating maybe $1 million or more in revenues, you've probably got 1 or 2 investors. You've got an established fund that's leading with half of the round, and then maybe you've got two other follow-on funds that are much more professional in their approach, and you've maybe got two or three funds coming together to fund that, versus the sort of 8 or so angels. And remember that early stage, you might be raising 250k, 300k across 8 individuals, versus at that later stage, you might be raising 10 million across 3 individual funds. So yeah, you're right. It kind of, to spread that risk, you end up having more early stage investors than later stage. You're then more confident to put quite a bit of capital into this business because it's somewhat proven by that point.
Got some traction. Okay, so we've got let's call it a tech entrepreneur, someone who's got some coding skills, and they've identified this opportunity. Their backgrounds are in technology and coding, and they've started the work. Where do they go to find these angel investors? You know, we're looking at eight or so people to invest.
Into an idea that they had, you're going to put the phone down immediately, going, that's one of those scam calls, right? So you've got to remember that that's the relationship here with any investor you're going to reach out to. So you need to be fully prepared with a really solid pitch and kind of business case around that vision. So you need to pitch the vision, get them excited by the idea, show that you've got some considerable thought and thinking behind how you see this business going, how you're going to spend their money, what it's going to achieve, what the ultimate goal is for this business, and document your thinking behind that with, a solid set of financial projections, a really solid business plan and strategy for the next. To the hundreds of founders that are pitching to these investors, you cut through as the one with the highest chance of success, the one that's really thought about the business case and how we're going to spend that money to leverage this capital and turn it into something much more valuable at a later point in time. So once you're feeling confident that you've got that business case together and are able to convince an investor to even take a look at you, let alone invest in you, you then can start that outreach. And there's a few different tactics here that I see work. There's a lot that I see that don't work, but the ones that work are kind of introductions to investors. So the first thing you need to do is create a target list of potential investors. And there's online tools like Crunchbase that are great for kind of identifying investors in your niche that have invested at your stage of development in a round size similar to yours in your sector and industry. And you can start to get a list of 200, 300, 400 or more investors that match criteria that would be interested in what you have to offer, because they've proven it in the past because they've invested in something similar. Then need to take that target list and do your research on those investors, and who can you get an introduction to through your existing network? Who can you manufacture an introduction to? So who else is in their portfolio? Who else have they invested in the past? And can I go and befriend those founders via LinkedIn, get to know them a little bit, and then ask for an introduction? Any way you can hustle yourself towards an introduction to those investors, I would recommend is your first port of call. That's the kind of golden ticket. That's the best way to get in front of an investor. Failing that, the second best approach in my experience is personalized and thoughtful outreach via kind of email. Usually could be done via LinkedIn, but contacting these investors at scale, you have to do hundreds of these emails, but kind of saying, here's the reason I'm approaching you is because you've recently invested in company X, Y, and Z, and we're doing something really exciting in a similar space. Here's a top level overview, a couple of bullet points. Attached is a sort of 5-slide intro document. If this is something that seems up your street, something you'd be interested in, perhaps we should arrange a time to have a chat when the time is right. and you're just kind of opening the conversation. You're not going in all guns blazing. We're raising 500k for our amazing idea, and we'd hope you'd, do you want to invest? It's like, that's the cold call, right? That's who are these guys? Why should I trust them? You're building a relationship. You're going, I've reached out to you because of your track record. I think you'll be interested in what we're doing. Is it worth a chat? And then you start taking the relationship from there. And they're really the two biggest ways of doing this and getting in front of investors. But it has to be done at scale. Otherwise, you're not going to get the number. One will end up actually signing the deal and depositing the cash in the bank. So you can work back from 30, 10, 2, or 1 to figure out, if I need 8 investors in my first round, this is how many I need to reach out to as an absolute minimum to stand any chance of getting the deal over the line.
And so it's just like any other sales ratio odds, really. If you're going out cold, you got to do your homework, you got to do preparation, you got to understand their risks and understand what's attractive to them.
Yeah, I mean, I often, in my book, I talk a lot about this is nothing more than a very targeted sales and marketing process. The sooner a founder can get an understanding of the fact that they're selling something of value, i.e. their shares, their equity in the business, in exchange for something of equal and greater value, i.e. the investor's cash. Yeah. And it's just like any other transaction, like when you go and buy a new TV or go and buy a house, you only want to pay what you believe it to be worth. Otherwise, you're not going to make the purchase. So you need to manufacture that scenario. And if you can get yourself into a position and treat the outreach as a sales and marketing campaign, and you know how many investors you need, and you've got a rough idea of therefore what the outreach level is required to get them through that funnel of kind of initial pitch, second and third meetings, due diligence, legals, ultimately closing the round. Talking to you're a lower risk and a better bet, and yeah, treating it like that sales and marketing campaign, understanding that the investor ultimately doesn't care about you and your idea. They care about getting a return on their investment. So the less you talk about your idea, the more you talk about how you're strategically going to deliver a return, the more you're going to win over hearts and minds with investors.
Okay, so we're talking about early stage businesses. We hear a lot, and I'm sure you see a lot of people who come to you and they've just got an idea and they go, hey, look, here's my idea when we say early stage, how much work do these angel investors expect you have done already? How much progress do they expect you to have made before they'll go, yeah, that's viable. I'll put my money in that. Because yeah, I'm having conversations with people all the time is that you haven't spent any money on it. You haven't taken any risk. It's just an idea. And you think someone's going to come and invest in you. We need a reality check.
That's it. Yeah, they need to see that you've put some risk, some effort, some idea to something that feels more viable. The truth is, it depends on which sector you're in and who you're speaking to. So if you're building an app for a consumer app, then it might be very different to if you're building a piece of medical technology, because there's a whole different kind of life cycle to how those businesses are kind of built and developed. But in general terms, you've got the bootstrapping phase, which would be kind of doing whatever you can, a little bit of friends and family money, a little bit of your own investment, or just your time while you're kind of moonlighting. Point. Imagine like if you're in a point where you feel you've proven this concept enough that you would feel comfortable quitting your job and all the securities that come with it to focus on this full time, because you're confident it will succeed, because you've validated the problem, you've validated the solution you propose to that problem. So enough people have this problem that it's worthwhile solving. The solution you've come up with is something the market really sees as beneficial and exciting and interesting. That the pricing, the people are willing to pay for this, and then how much they're willing to pay, and what kind of revenue model might suit them. Is it a monthly subscription? Is it a one-off cost? How do you charge for this, and what's the right kind of price point? If you can feel confident in those three things, and fourth thing might be that the market size is big enough to sustain that kind of level of revenue for the solution that you've identified. If you can prove to yourself that those four things are in place and that you feel comfortable enough to quit your job to go and do this full time, then you're probably in a position to then go and try and convince an investor that it's worth that first kind of pre-seed, we call it, round of investment, that first initial kind of 2, 3, 4, can be up to sort of 500-700K for some sectors, to get more proof, more traction, maybe a proof of concept built, maybe some early beta users kind of testing the solution. So if you're in that position, you can go out and raise funding. I think if you had an idea in the pub last night with a mate, you probably need to do a bit more work before you can go and ask someone for their money.
Yeah, I like that as a test. If you've taken it to the point where you're confident in effectively backing yourself and leaving your job, believing that much, then there's a fair chance that someone else will also believe in you, because you're putting your money where your mouth is.
You're asking the investors to believe in you and have faith in you. And if you don't have that in yourself, how could you possibly sell that in confidently to an investor? It's just not going to happen.
Okay. So we've got the business to the stage where we believe in it, we're backing it, we're going to exit, eventually I'll sharpen my skills and also my conversation of inspiring, and I'll get better at my conversations of bringing investors on board. So I need to do that over a period of time. I've then got my business to my point where I've got some people interested. Now they're going to want to protect their risk. What are they asking for from you when it comes to if they're going to invest in their business?
Yeah. So
when I say you, I mean the business owner.
the various different ways. Later stage investors tend to start dabbling in things called preferential shares, which you should really be careful about as a founder before agreeing to such terms. Their money may be valuable, but a preferential share could mean you walk away with nothing on the event that you exit, because you're guaranteed certain things to happen, there's certain trigger events, or if you plan on spending more than X on any one supplier, that needs to get approval from the initial boards. There could all be these sort of checks and balances in to help angel investors kind of manage the risk as much as they can. Because I've seen the other side of this, right? I've seen, not long out of uni, I think he actually quit uni and he'd validated it really well. He'd done all those things that we just talked about, and he managed to convince a load of investors not to give him 300k, which was his initial ask, but 900k was what he ended up getting offered to him by these various investors. So you give this 18-year-old lad nearly £1 million, and there was no checks and balances, nothing, and he just had £1 million land in his account the next day. Before you know it, he's on inverted commas business trips around the world with his girlfriend, building the business, and no product got built. He had a lovely flat in London, no product ever materialized, nothing seemed to happen. Lots of lovely business class flights to the States and various places with his co-founder and his partners on business, but nothing really materialized from it. And I was having investors contact me asking, do you know what's happened with this founder? Like, we haven't heard from them in ages. And I only knew these things because I happened to follow him on Facebook or something. We were friends on Facebook and I could see what he was doing with their money. They had no idea. So that's the negative side. That's what could happen. They've got no control a lot of the time. So there's a lot of trust and a lot of faith going into that founder. And that's why it's such a long process. Like that's why they do a number of meetings and they really delve into the business case and they really understand what you want to do with your money and your passions and why you do what you do. And more experienced investors will start to put some checks and balances in things like shareholders agreements to protect themselves on an eventual potential downside. So yeah, that's why it may seem tough, but that from an investor's perspective, you can perhaps see why they would put these checks and balances in place.
As they should do, because they're putting a lot of money down.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the things that we need to do to get our business to the stage, especially a tech type business, early stage business, to be attractive for investors to want to invest into. What are some of the common mistakes you see, James?
So I think not communicating everything that they plan to do in the right way. That's probably by far the biggest issue for me. Like whenever I speak to investors, when I was interviewing investors ahead of my writing my book, that's what it pretty much boiled down to. They weren't saying yes to an acquisition, the sort of M&A, the exit market looks like in your sector. Do you even know who's currently exiting and for what valuations? And do you even know what you need to build to make this a viable and exitable business? Or are you just focused on the short term? I need to get my proof of concept built. So they didn't understand kind of and these things. The founders weren't explaining their plans around these areas well enough. And because of that, they weren't investing. So by far the biggest mistake is relying on your idea, right? No investor is investing in your idea. And the founders that believe it's the power of their idea that's going to ultimately raise them the investment are the founders that ultimately fail at raising investment. It's the ones that go beyond an idea and have that strategic plan and can build the investors' trust that you as an individual, you as a founding team, know what is needed, know what it takes to build this from an idea to a viable business and beyond. That's the founders that ultimately get the fund. The fund.
So they're not keeping their investors up to date. They're not thinking beyond, the cash coming into the business and what the exit plan is and how everyone's going to get their return.
That's it.
What about if they're getting investment from angel investors? Can business owners expect any other input from these angel investors? Are they like the dragons who want to get involved and use their contacts and what have you?
Yeah.
How do they get involved?
It really depends, right? It depends on the investor. And I always recommend to founders that they do their own due diligence on the investors that they're bringing into their company, right? And ask to be introduced to some members of their portfolio and founders and see whether or not they're a good investor, because they might say they're a nightmare. They micromanage everything. They're on the phone every week. We can't get on with anything because they're always butting in. On the other hand, they might say they're really useful because they like to open doors. They're really supportive. We meet once a month. They give some really good strategic input, and they're really happy for us to go off and do what we know is best for the company, but they'll guide and support us in any areas, and they'll open doors where they can. Some founders don't even want that. Some founders want a very passive investor that's happy to just give the money and let them go on with it. So it really depends on what you want as a founder, and to do your own due diligence on the investor and find out whether or not they're the right fit for you. But my advice is always try and find strategic advisors plus investors. So if they're a strategic advisor that comes with some money, is kind of, smart money, we call it, like not just cash and advice and support. That's the ideal for an early stage business.
So we got a part of when we're assessing fit, it's as much as us assessing the investors as it is the investors assessing us, the business owners, and we've got to assess them based not only their desire and ability to bring cash into our business, but what else do they provide, or what else do they want to bring to the business, and is that a fit? Is that a match for us? So we've got to assess the commercial as well as the.
And are the visions aligned? Does the investor truly believe in what you're building, or do they see this kind of taking a different shape because they're going to be sort of peddling their narrative of going, oh, you could do this, or you could move into over here? And do they have an ulterior motive, or do as much interviewing of them as they're doing interviewing of you, to make sure that they share that vision, and they're not going to be a hindrance basically to your success.
Yeah, really good point. So James, that leads us nicely, I guess, to we've brought an investor into the business. We've got our pitch right. We've gone out and done a research on all of our investors. We found a few, and we've shortlisted them, and they've shortlisted us, and it's all worked out perfectly. And they've invested the money. We've gone and developed our product to a certain point, and we've used the money. What happens next? Like how does that help support an exit, and when should we be exiting our business? And we all know that entrepreneurs are fantastic for taking a business so far, and then they become the problem, the bottleneck. How much clarity do we want around that, and what happens next?
Yeah, it's an interesting. A lot of founders I speak to don't like the idea of exiting their business, and the reality is, by the time they're 5 years into this and done 2 or 3 rounds of investment, and they've got thousands of customers, hundreds of staff to manage, suddenly they don't want to be a CEO. They like building things. They don't want to be a CEO of a giant organization. That's not what they did this for. So actually, the reality is, when you get to that point, you probably do want to be looking for an exit, and you'll be thankful to look for an exit. So typically speaking, we'd see for high growth startups that we're talking about today that's seeking investment, you'd be looking on average to do 3 rounds of investment before you then exit the business. But even if you don't, I feel that having raised investment at some point between now and when you decide to exit your business, whether you're looking at as a high growth tech startup or whether you're a consultancy, if you can get some angel funding in to go and build something and push the business forward, that validates your value in the market. Someone external to the business has said, this is what we value the business to be at. And that really helps you, I think, in those exit negotiations and in terms of showing and documenting your progress on valuation. So if we take the kind of tech startup kind of classic example, 3 rounds of investment, you're raising more money each time at a higher valuation each time, selling in the region of 15% equity each time. So those 3 rounds of investment end up at about 45% equity sold. So you're in just over half of the company, but that company is 5, 10, 30 times more valuable than it was when you started. So you've got 50% more of a bigger pie. And those rounds of investment have really started to justify your valuation when it comes to exit, because there's been multiple third parties agree that this is a sensible valuation for the asset you've built, which is of course your business. So yeah, super important. In terms of when to look for exit, it varies with different businesses. In terms of pitching to investors, I would say always look to be in an exitable position within 5 years. So your 5-year forecast will show you to be in an exitable position. Now you can decide whether you exit then or continue on the growth curve, raise more funding and go even bigger. But you should be in a position where you could take some kind of exit and get some kind of return for you and your investors within 5 years of taking any individual round of investment. So that's a general rule of thumb.
Okay. So James, look, we've scratched the surface of this topic, and there's so much more we could cover. If we've caught the attention of listeners of the podcast and they're exploring this, what can they do? Is there clearly you've got some knowledge and experience here. What can they do to tap into your knowledge and learn more?
Yeah, the very best thing they could do is visit a website, pitchready.co.uk. And from there, you'll get a quiz testing you on your investment readiness and giving you a score, and a 12-page tailored report on your current investment readiness with tips on what you need to do to make yourself more investor ready. And from there, you'll get kind of a number of different kind of options. You can download or order a copy of my book. Anyone in the UK can get a copy of my book in the post completely free. Outside of the UK, you can get an audio book and a PDF option. You'll also get invited to a 90-minute strategy. Will kind of .co.uk will open up a whole sort of bundle of goodies that will help you along that journey of kind of figuring out, is investment right for you, and if you are thinking of investment, what you need to do. Myself investor ready.
Brilliant. Alrighty. Hey, James, that's fantastic. One last question for you, if I may. Look, I ask this of everyone who appears on the Exit Insights podcast. What's the one message, the key message that you want listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Nail your communication with investors. Get really good at nailing the communication and treating this like selling any other product in your business. You're just selling shares in your business. That's your product, and you need to communicate that value to the investors.
Brilliant. Hey, thanks for sharing your insights with us, James. Really appreciate you joining us.
No, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.